It's now my pleasure to introduce our next guest, who many of you say, frankly, needs no introduction, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. You know, Governor Brown has devoted his life to the betterment of all citizens of California. His accomplishments, frankly, could keep us occupied for the remainder of the day, but as you may know, have included being Secretary of State here in California, the Mayor of Oakland, and the Attorney General. In his first 2 terms as governor in 1974 and 1978, he helped create millions of jobs, strengthened environmental protections, and promoted renewable energy. This was at a time when it was truly visionary and set the state, the country, and the world on the right path. He was elected to his 3rd term in 2010 and his 4th term in 2014. And since returning to the office, his accomplishments have been truly impressive. He's helped eliminate the state's multi-billion-dollar budget deficit. He's spearheaded successful campaigns to provide billions in new funding for California's schools. And he's established a robust rainy day fund for the next economic downturn. Under his leadership, California has cut its unemployment rate in half, expanded health coverage to 1 million more Californians, and added more than 2 million new jobs. All the time while enacting sweeping reforms in a number of areas, including public safety, immigration, workers' compensation, water, pension, and economic development. You know, also under his leadership and vision, Governor Brown has committed the world's 5th largest economy to perhaps the most aggressive climate goals on the planet. Under SB 32, the state will reduce greenhouse gas emissions 40% below 1990 levels, generate half of its electricity from renewable sources, double the rate of energy efficiency savings in buildings, and reduce today's petroleum use in cars and trucks by up to 50%. One crucial battle of his climate legacy is currently underway, seeking reauthorization for California's cap and trade program post-2020. Please join me in proving to the world that economic growth and environmental protection are not only compatible, but a moral and ethical imperative for all of us in the 21st century, Governor Jerry Brown.
Thank you very much. Good. Thank you. This will be like the 7th inning stretch early. So anyway, I'm really glad to be here and talk about that esoteric topic, cap and trade. And there are a variety of ideas that travel under that phrase. And California is certainly right at the center of a lot of the activity of trying to deal with navigating carbon markets, creating carbon markets, and making our whole economy and way of life sustainable over the long term. And so when I hear of all these things that I've allegedly done, from my point of view, I'm always looking out into the future to see all the things that are not done and how difficult those things are. So we can look at it as half full or half empty, the glass, but however we want to phrase what you've done or what I've done, the real challenge is what we have to do and what is not done yet. It's that challenge before us, and it's quite a challenge. I like to hear that California is doing all these things. First of all, we haven't got the cap and trade reauthorization yet, and I'm going to be working on that very hard in the next several weeks. But it is all dependent on how deep the understanding is about the threats that we face. And how deeply do people understand the nature of climate change and what's going on in the atmosphere and in the chemistry that constitutes our world that we live in and have our being. And I would say the understanding is not very deep. It's deep on the mind of scientists, but in the minds of politicians, in the minds of ordinary people with their cares and their families and their their interests and their insecurities and their joys. There's a long way to go before we understand. And it's in this broader context of thinking broadly, thinking about the future. A friend of mine, a professor who teaches part-time in Stanford and the rest of the time in Paris, talks about catastrophic thinking and how difficult that is. How do you think about catastrophe, potential catastrophe, so as to postpone it, let alone avoid it? How do you deal with it? And I can tell you in politics, that's not a topic that people want to be interested in. We're anchored in very specific constituencies, groups, businesses, unions, identity groups, newspaper stories. It's a world of its own. But the world of global chemistry is the real world, and that world is being affected. The Western Antarctic ice is melting. I just had a briefing yesterday from some scientists from the University of California, San Diego. They say the melting of the West Antarctic ice shelf is irreversible. And they put out different odds about how we took the San Francisco Bay here and how long will it take to get to 1 foot sea rise, 2 feet, 3 feet. And there's various probabilities going out over the next 100 years, depending upon what happens. On the path we're on now, we're looking, certainly, at a few feet of sea level rise. But it's not inconceivable. It is scientifically possible that you could see a 10-foot rise in sea level. Now, they don't put a probability on that. They don't know, they can't tell you the number. They can only say, the scientists who study this, that it's possible. And if it's possible, we ought to think about it. Now, most people don't want to think about catastrophe. I'm not one of those people. I like to think about catastrophe. Most politicians think the only catastrophe is their electoral defeat. And I've experienced that, and I don't like it. But in order to avoid it, you have to think about it and do things that create the opposite, which is victory. But those are trivial little problems, whether you win or lose an election. We're talking about our way of life and will it be sustained? And climate change is still moving in a direction that is not positive. And yes, the Paris Agreement was a major step forward. And I was there. It was impressive. All the nations of the world, Russia, India, China, the United States, they're all there. And they made a statement. And they made a commitment, made different commitments. And that's good. But the fact is that greenhouse gases are still being generated, and their quantity and presence in our world is still growing. And it's growing at a level that has not shown, we haven't stopped. And we got to put a limit, we have to stop growing, and then we got to reverse. And we got to decarbonize. We don't have to navigate carbon markets, we have to decarbonize. We have to stop using carbon for our prosperity. And stopping carbon will be like stopping a heroin addiction, because we are addicted to carbon in the sense that we are repeatedly using it, and we get a tremendous high, our whole way of life. Everybody here, the chairs, the plastic on here, everything, it's carbon. Carbon is why we're all here, why we're all civilized. But that's the dilemma. We have to find a way to take all this carbon-induced intelligence and turn it into a decarbonized intelligence and decarbonized way of life. That's not easy. I can just tell you from my experience, I don't think very many people are of the understanding required to get the job done. Now, maybe some of you are, maybe all of you are, but then you're different than most of the people I run into, because I can tell you, navigating carbon markets, much less decarbonizing, is not on the agenda of most people. It's not there. Now, I don't know a lot about science. I only took physics and chemistry in high school, and that was it. But I have studied politics for at least 50 years. And I know from the political transformation needed to get to the decarbonized world, we've got a long way to go. And we're going to have a wake-up. We're going to have a shift. In the 70s, we talked about paradigm shifts. Well, that's a word. I wouldn't want to use it anymore because it's been overused. But it's going to take something like that, a pattern shift of our thinking, our economy, our culture, our set of relationships. It's very profound. So this cap and trade business, which I will talk about, it's a piece of that. It's an important piece. And before, as I was coming here this morning, I looked up cap and trade on Wikipedia. So now I feel very informed. The NRDC also was the second site in Google, and it looked too technical to me. But it had all the different places where they have cap and trade emissions tradings, and California was one of them, but I didn't have time to open it up. So I just got through the Wikipedia, and I saw there's a lot of issues, a lot of problems. And I know there's a lot of problems because when I was in Paris, I was at one of these groups, and all of a sudden this group stood up and started yelling and protesting our cap and trade market in California. So they say it's a bad thing. Well, I always thought it was a good thing. And it is a good thing, and I know there's lots of problems. I know it because I finished the Wikipedia article. There's cheating, and there's this, and there's that. But the fact is, it is an effective pathway if combined with a lot of other things. So we can't just leave it to the market. The market is amazing. It's creating the prosperity, and it can also end the prosperity if it keeps going at its present trajectory. But the market is powerful, but we need other things. And that's why we have regulation. And we have to engender values and understandings that are shared that will get people to make the shift. So this is really big, the change. And yes, China is leading the way. China is really, in one way, is our great hope now. It's very paradoxical that we have a president who says two things. Number one, climate change is a hoax. That's his first value proposition. His second is that it was created by China. And the truth is that China is on a path to do a hell of a lot more than the Trump administration in dealing with climate change. So if there's any hoax, it's in the White House, not in Beijing. So we have a problem, and I don't want to make a partisan remark, and this is not meant to be partisan, but we do have two parties, and one of them has a slavish adherence to the non-belief in anything to do with climate change. In fact, I talked to one Republican, a high Republican official, and he said, look, I can work with you on renewable energy and solar and wind, but don't ask me to use the word global warming or climate change. I can't use those words because they'll be stigmatized. This is like going to the Vatican. Said, we'd like to talk about Planned Parenthood and abortion. And no, you can't talk about that. It's really, you are a skunk at the lawn party if you're at the Vatican talking about abortion. And if you're at the Republican caucus talking about climate change, same thing. It's doctrinally deviant. And we got to change that somehow. Because if not, you can't have half the political force in America, in the most powerful country in the world, saying, no, it's not true. And you got the leader saying it's a hoax. It's a Chinese hoax. That's so implausible and so stupid that the fact that it's being said, it takes my breath away. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, if you can say that, you can say anything. You can say, so then what's left of democratic discourse if there's no anchor in syntax or the English language or grammar? Where are you? You're nowhere. You're in an Alice in Wonderland world. What is up is down and vice versa. So we're going to change that. In California, we are fighting. We're resisting. We're not really resisting. We are pioneering an intelligent path forward. And we've got a long way to go. And whatever my temperament is, I don't know why, maybe because I spent 4 years in the Jesuit seminary, and I was rereading one of my ascetical treatises, which I took with me when I left the seminary. And I have the 3 volume of this fellow Rodriguez, very obscure Spaniard from the 16th century. Anyway, the 2 key elements of the spiritual life, I know I shouldn't be telling you about this, but I'm going to tell you anyway, are prayer and mortification. And both are needed to deal with Trump. You need prayer because we need divine assistance. And you need mortification because you got to tighten your belt, you got to do difficult things, you got to go against yourself. You can't just flow and just go with the flow. We got to go against the flow. We got to re-channel the flow because the flow is now leading us to catastrophe. And whether it's 50 years, 100 years, or 200 years, if the climate change, the temperature, the emissions from all the sources globally, as they build up, if it becomes an irreversible change of 2 degrees centigrade, and then 3, and then 4, where's the tipping point? Do we know? And the answer is we don't know. We know the possibility of horror is there in the science. That's what good science is telling us. So can we react to something that isn't, the stock market or the unemployment figures or an environmental disaster from a waste dump or a toxic emission or something? We have to be able to imagine. And imagination is not, it's not normal in politics. Because our job is not to imagine, our job is to figure out what the majority wants and give it to them. That's not very imaginative. That's just kind of elementary arithmetic. You take a survey, this is what they want, this is what you say. So we're all just talking, we mouth. We have our little code, we see what it is and we tell you. What we got to do is look out at the world and see where we're going and make sure we don't get there. And I think that is the profound challenge. And I know Mary Nichols is here, and we have Rodriguez here. We have a lot of other, and they can tell you about this thing called cap and trade and how the market works and all that good stuff, and how we're going to fix it and make it even better. And that's important. And we're doing a lot of other things. We're regulating buildings and appliances, and we're going to incentivize electric cars. We're going to get people out of there walking. And my wife and I got 2 bikes for Christmas. We're riding our bikes every other day. So at one time, I thought even talking about bikes and transportation was a bad political move because they just laugh at you. Back when I was governor the first time, you know what they called people? Non-motorized units. When they build a bridge, they said, are we going to accommodate non-motorized units? That's having a walkway. And usually they didn't, because that's not the plan. The plan is get those cars moving as fast as possible, as far as possible. That's kind of the plan. Now we got to change that. We need to make our cities more elegant and more dense, more livable, and decarbonized. And this is really a big challenge. And I would say that even China has got to step up a lot more. And America, we're just heading in the wrong direction until we make that reverse. Hopefully, over the next couple of years, that's going to happen. And you people, and I don't know who you people are for the most part. I mean, you're market people and business people. Well, you're part of the power. And we all are responsible in our own callings to be able to change the attitude. So this has to be an attitudinal adjustment. That's what, sometimes people refer to that to the cocktail hour, attitudinal adjustment. Well, this is much more than a cocktail. This is going to take a profound shift, almost a conversion in how we see our lives and our world. And yes, the market is a good mechanism, but it's far broader than that. And to do that practically, we have our Under 2 coalition, which we now have, and that represent well over 1 billion people, 170 provinces and states, and even nations are joining in. So whatever they're doing in Washington, and I'm not responsible for Washington. I don't know that anybody is right now. We are forming our own Under 2 coalition, and we're going to recruit mobilize and work with all the states and provinces and countries. I don't want to use the phrase a coalition of the willing. That was the group that got us into the Iraq War, or one of the Iraq wars, I think it was. But we are a coalition, and we're a powerful coalition. And since the science is there, the truth is there, his truth is marching on. Yeah, truth is powerful, and we have to embrace that and be confident that we're on the side of science, and we're on the side of truth. And whatever the flim-flam artists do or say, we're going to overcome that. And how powerful that propaganda is, I was randomly looking through Google the other day, which I do when I find things getting too boring. And I wanted to look up the hit parade. I don't know if you older people remember the hit parade. That was the top songs. And they were always these popular songs, you know, Irene Goodnight and Harbor Lights and all that stuff from the 50s. Anyway, I clicked on the hit parade, and they had one of the songs, and they had a week on television, the hit parade. And it wasn't the nice songs from Joni James or whoever she was. It was the advertiser, the sponsor, which was a Lucky Strike. It was Lucky, LSMFT. Lucky Strike means fine tobacco. And you had all these ads. It was many, many ads. And it was all in white. And they had Mrs. Vanderbilt, because she was the etiquette lady, saying that the etiquette for, don't drop your ashes on the floor. Make sure they get in the ashtray. And she takes a drag. The whole thing was a cigarette promotion. And it was white and clean and pure. And I thought to myself, the tens of thousands of cancer deaths that were promoted by this incredible diabolical propaganda that looks so wholesome. And that really is a lesson to me. It may look wholesome, but it can be really lethal. And that's a lot of the ingredients of what lead to and foster climate change. So under our two coalition, we're not waiting for Congress, we're not waiting for the president. We're going to do everything we can. We're going to do everything we can now at this meeting, going to China in June, the COP23. There is a force, and I think that force is irresistible, because when people see what the stakes are, they will respond. It's just a matter of, can we feel it? Can we imagine it? Can we join together? And the Under Two Coalition is one part, and all of you have your own. And we'll use the market, we'll use regulation, we'll use rallies, we'll use research, we'll use everything. Even the Vatican is joining, the Pontifical Academy. We'll go anywhere, meet with anybody. But I think we have to never think we're getting there. We're not getting there yet. We have not made the turn to make a sustainable world. We are still on a dangerous, dire path, and we got to reverse. So don't relax. Don't feel good about yourself. I know there's a lot of psychology that says, you know, I love me, I'm feeling good. No, don't do that. See how bad it is, and then make it good. And you can feel good about that. Only that. Anyway, that's all I got to say. So good luck, and do more than you thought you were going to do when you first came to this meeting. Thank you very much.